Chapter 1 Chantaways. In many places of the world, when a person is ill, a song is sung to heal. For this is to be effective, that person must let this song sink into their body and allow it to penetrate to even cellular level of their being. In a sense, she must breathe it in. A song, a physical terms. In an action made of breath and sound, it is made by the vibrations of air across a section of membranes in the throat, which are then shaped by the placement of the tongue and the mouth. That is a literal description of singing. But of course, there is more, much more. A song is also made from the mind, from memory, from imagination, from community, and from heart. Like all things, a song may be seen in scientific terms or in spiritual terms, yet neither one is sufficient. They need each other to truly represent the reality of the song. Singing comes from the misty place where human psychology, feeling, and spirits collide. It can ever be, for some people, a holy act, a religious act, and an act with great power. Today's medicinal environment provides more than healing opponents than ever for a person who becomes sick. CAT scans and MRI pictures in the inside of a human body with astonishing detail. Dangerous, invasive surgeries have been made complacent and intricate operations and now performed with lasers. New drugs with capabilities formerly unimagined are being discovered every day. The Human Genome Project is mapping our DNA from prehistoric times to the present, giving us a better understanding of the evolution of genetic disorders and opening up the door to the possibility of someday being able to manipulate human genetic strands and create better human beings. Yet another type of medicine is also being practiced on our planet. It is one that involves not only the body, but the mind and the spirit. It involves not only the person, but her family, her community, and her world. It involves song. The notion of singing person to wellness, the health may sound strange. You may think it's unusual of me, a trained physician, even to mention it. But I am not talking about a new age or alternative treatment. I am speaking of the medicine ways of the tribe, the Navajo, where the singer is called in when someone is sick. As part of the cure, they perform a sing or ceremony called Chantaway. The beauty way, the night chant, the mountain way, different kinds of songs cure different kinds of illnesses. A shooting way ceremony might be used to cure an illness throughout to have been caused by a snake, lightning, or arrows. A life way may cure an illness caused by an accident. An enemy way heals an illness believed to be caused by the ghost of a non-Navajo. There are even songs for mental instability. Not long ago, I learned that the Navajos aren't the only people on earth to recognize the power of human voice. In places like Africa, the people sing broken bones in order to mend them. And yet the power of a song lies not only in a tested, quantifiable, and clinical world. It will also be written about in the New England Journal of Medicine. It will not be discussed at the meetings of American Medicinal Association. Many physicians, good ones, frown at the very mention of it. Yet one afternoon at the hospital where I worked at, surgeon in Gallup, New Mexico, singing was going on at the bedside of Charlie Nez. I stood in the doorway watching the medicine man leave. I was surprised to see an elderly man who has stirred little in the preceding days sit up straighter and look attentive. I glanced at his chart. His heart rate was steady, and his blood pressure had stabilized. There was a new red flush of circulation to his cheeks. Charlie Nez was being treated with the chemotherapy, radiation, and surgery for an advanced cancer. I know this because I was one of the doctors participating in this treatment. I had performed the surgery on his colon to remove a tumor. But this treatment was not the entirety of the medicine he received as I stood in the doorway listening to the song of the medicine man who stood beside him, his voice rising and falling in a familiar range of tones. I saw a minor miracle in the Charlie's eyes for the very first time I'd met him was hope. Any physician will tell you that unless dying patient has hope and emotional strength, the will to live, a doctor do little to save him. Watching the hope come back into Charlie Nez's eyes, I realized something else. I would take both medicines to help heal the patients. The only surprising thing about this realization of the two sides of medicine is that it had taken me so long to comprehend this duality, this two-ness. My name is Dr. Lori Avizo. I am a general surgeon. I am the first woman in my tribe to learn, practice, and discipline of surgery. And it has put me in a rare position of being able to clearly and distinctly two different styles of medicine and relate to them both. In my house in Gallup, New Mexico, in the dictionary, it is striking. My beeper lies on the table. My cellular phone is recharging in its cradle, and a stack of medicinal journals stand next to my hand-woven wool and leather cradleboard, propped against one wall. A menagerie of bare fetishes inhabits the mantelplate, and through the window I can see the rolling desert peppered and pinot trees beneath the stale-colored sky. I am continually reminded that the simple truth about my life. I live between two worlds. In one where I am dispenser of a very technologically advanced Western style of medicine. In the other, people are healed by songs, herbs, sand, paintings, and ceremonies held by firelight and deep winter. My father was full-blooded Navajo, the son of Shinalach, Shinali, or grandmother, Grace, of my mother is Bilachama, Bilagana, which in Navajo means white person, whose ancestors came from Europe. If you were a Navajo, you would introduce myself to you by telling you my clans. My father's mother clan is Tishnashe, or the Black Streaked Wood Clan. His father's clan was Asihe Dme, and the Salt Clan. This would tell Navajos not only where I come from, but whether we are related because members of the same clan consider each other brothers and sisters. The clans are the names of our bloodline. When I introduce myself to the white world, I tell you that I am a doctor educated at Stanford University specializing in generalized surgery. In my two worlds, I am different people. I define in different ways. In one way by my clan and by my people, in the other by my educational and worldly accomplishments, in one by blood and the other by paper. Much of the time, in many circumstances, I am reminded of the metaphor weaving. My life itself feels like a Navajo rug. I am weaving where the warp is one culture and the weft another. I am pulling strings in my life across itself to make it make sense. My former home embodied these contentions. It was just 1 mile from the Gallup Indian Medical Center, where I was in practice about 50 miles from the tiny town of Crown Point. A cluster of houses and stores braced against the window backdrop of the high and plutonious on the eastern border of the Navajo Reservation. Crown Point is the town where 3 decades ago I played on the mesas, babysat my 2 little sisters, and whenever I could read books and authors like Jack London, Robert Louis Stevenson. I read my way through the tiny local libraries and the vans that came into our country from the books on the Wells program. I attended Crown Point Elementary School at Crown Point High School reservation schools, which are about 95% Navajo. People in the Crown Point lived a hard life. Many families had no running water or electricity. They lived in hugans, or traditionally 8-sided dwellings, built to face on the east, and I would someday become a doctor, much less a surgeon. I never deemed that I would become a doctor, someday a surgeon. Navajo children didn't dream of such things. We did not allow ourselves to dream that large. We did not have Navajo doctors, lawyers, or other professions back then. The Navajo people I knew raised sheep or worked for the government. Some of them worked for the convenience stores or for the uranium mines. Doctors, in my experience, were Bilachmas, Bilaganas, and male. Yet I was encouraged to read and to dream. My mother always seemed to look the other way when I should have been helping more with chores and work, allowing me to disappear into my other realms, into my lives with people whose world was so vast compared to Crown Point. The face that my life split between cultures was one of my earliest realizations. There is a world for this Navajo auntie, or a person who is half. The Chinese who some anthropologists believe that our long time ago Asian ancestors of my tribe have another way of describing it. They called it shukskovoy, which is also a thin filament between bamboo layers and is considered neither here nor there. Even as I type these words, I'm going against my basic understanding of my tribe. DNA strongly discourage talking about drawing our attention to themselves. We are taught from the earliest age to be humble, not to brag or speak about our accomplishments. To talk about myself in a book is to go against this part of myself. This brings discomfort, but I also believe this story is important to Navajo girls who may want to know what possibilities are there for them. To people who wish to think about healing in a broader sense. To doctors who find their profession somehow lacking. To sick people who may want to look at their illnesses in a different way. In a time when there is great confusion about how to best treat the human body to care for its ages or become sick, my stories shed light on how two cultures gain acknowledgement from each other, knowledge about health and wellness. The bodies and spirits are giving out at our birth, and the ways to take care for them. I was born Jeanette Lorraine Cup in a military hospital in Tacoma, Washington. I pray for my delivery of my father, who is serving in the armory. Poured out a bag of silver dollars onto the hospital administration's desk. It was about $17, and as the coins clinked and glistened onto the desk in a heap, he realized it was all the money he had. Soon he moved my mother and me back home into the reservation, and I was raised by my two sisters, Karen and Robin, who were born not long afterwards. We grew up in a small Navajo community of Crown Point, in a family without money, power, or influence. Most people still spoke Navajo as their first language, and many did not speak English at all. My father, charming, intelligent, and handsome, but subjected to alcoholic binges. And my mother, who was blonde-haired, blue-eyed, and very attractive, she married my father before she finished high school. He brought her into the reservation to work with him at a trading post, where she was 2 weeks shy of her 16th birthday. So in this sense, she grew up at the reservation as well. My Shenali Navajo grandmother, Grace Cup, told us many stories about the people we came from and our clan, the Tishinoshi. She told us the long walk when Navajo people have been forced to go all the way around the southern New Mexico and were held at army bases there. She told us to speak English and to learn American ways, but also to remember DNA ways. She did that to herself too. Although she carried a purse like an American woman, she watched television and had developed a taste for hamburgers and Chinese takeout. In the morning, she often went outside at dawn and looked at the east to greet the morning sun like DNA woman. She enjoyed mutton sandwiches and stews. She liked to collect plants on mesas. To make teas, she said she could smell the slightest change in the weather. She loved to see how snow-capped Mount Taylor, the southern sacred mountain, shimmering in the distance. From her own example, she learned to be a Navajo was to be part of the DNA nation, as well as the larger Native American culture, proud and strong. But simply by opening our eyes, we could also see that the Navajo meant to be a downtrodden and broken, treated like a lesser human by the white people. As we were growing up, we heard stories of Indian people being captured as slaves, and Spaniards as slaves by the Spaniards. We learned the story of the village Wounded Knee, a place where nearly 400 Lakota men, women, and children were massacred in the late 1890s by the 7th Cavalry, and where an armed takeover of the Indian activists occurred on February 27, 1973, to protest a century of oppressions in white society. He watched the occupation of Alcatraz Island in 1969, where Indians occupied Alcatraz for 19 months to challenge the prevailing images of Native Americans as the fading victims of the history and resistance to the policies and treatments of Indian communities. And individuals in the past, the present, we watch with fascination and tinge of pride on our living room television sets. We learned how the American governments took away Navajo livestock, how they brought into companies to mine the land that they give give us to live on. My sister and I do not inherit our spoken language, as English was the primary language in our home, but we did not inherit the grief of the people watch home. We did not inherit, English. We did not inherit the grief of the people. It is often referred to as historical grief, coming onto the world and being burdened with centuries of suffering behind you. Centuries ago, that as you grow older, you learn of it, becomes your own. Like Black Americans who must teach their children that their ancestors arrived on a country as slaves, and the Jews who must tell their children about the Holocaust, and the Tibetans who must tell their children about the murderous invasions of the Chinese armies. Navajo children are told of the capture and murder of the forefathers and mothers, and their way too must share in the legacy of grief. In addition, dealing with the effects of this grief, the previous generation's poverty, depression, and alcoholism, it snowballs. As I grow older, I learn more about the history of my tribe. I too grieved and became angry. My mother, a white woman on the reservation, grew up to be loved and accepted by our Navajo friends and our neighbors. But from where we saw, it was meant to always be slightly outside a culture, somewhere on its margin, in a place where we could not completely belong. We learned that it was what it was like to feel prohibitable, and this doubly ironic because it felt peripheral to a culture that itself peripheral to the larger culture that has engulfed it. We lived on the margin of a margin, which dangerously close to nowhere at all. My parents held no college degrees, but they encouraged my sister and I to get an education. In high school, I allowed myself to believe I might someday hold a college degree. I resisted my larger dreams for fears or for they could not come true. In my high school careers of 58 students, only 6 went to college. Years later, after medical school, I returned to work for my own tribe. Although I could not have more of a lucrative practice elsewhere, I knew that the Navajo people mistrusted Western medicine and that Navajo customs and beliefs, even Navajo ways of interacting with others, often stood in direction opposing to the ways that I was trained at the Stanford. Opposing to the ways I was trained at the Stanford to deliver medical care. I wanted to make a difference in the lives of my people, not only by providing surgery to heal them, also by making it easier for them to understand, relate to, and accept Western medicine by speaking some Navajo with them, by showing them respect for their ways, and by being one of them. I could help them. I watched my patients, I listened to them, I slowly began to develop better ways to heal them, ways to respect their cultures and belief. I decided to incorporate these traditional beliefs and the customs into my practice. Amazingly enough, as I gradually allowed my Navajo upbringing to affect my Western medical practices, I found that physicians who placed much more emphasis on their technical abilities and clinical skills than their abilities to be caring and sensitive. I have unconsciously adopted many of these attitudes, but while working on the DNA, I worked to improve my bedside manner, learning little ways to make my patients feel truly trusting and comforted with treatments that were completely alien to them. Navajo patients did not respond well to the brusque and distant style of Western doctors. To them, this is not acceptable. To walk into a room, quickly open someone's shirt and listen to their heart with a stethoscope, or stick something in their mouth or ear, nor it is acceptable to ask for probing and personal questions. As I adapted my practice to my culture, my patients relaxed in situations that could otherwise been highly stressful to them. As they become more comfortable and at ease with something even more remarkable, astonishing, even happening. When patients were trusting and accepting before their surgeries, the operation seemed to be more successful. If they were anxious, distressful, did not understand, or resisted treatment, they seemed to have more operating and preposterous complications. Could this be happening? The more I watched, the more I saw. Indeed, true. Incorporating Navajo philosophies of balance and symmetry, respected and connectedness into my family, they filtered my patients and allowed everything in my own 2 words to make sense. Navajos believe that I don't know how to say it. HOZHO or HOZHOMNI, Walking Beauty, or worldwide view in which everything in life is connected and influences everything else. A stone thrown into a pond can influence the life of a deer in the forest. A human voice and a spoken word can influence events around it, and all things possess spirit and power. So Navajos make every effort to live in the harmony and balance with everything and Navajos make every effort to live in harmony with everything and everything else. Their belief system sees sickness and result of things falling out of balance, of losing one's way on path of beauty and its belief system. Religion and medicine are one and the same. At a certain point, I felt quite sure that my relationship with my Navajo parents were directly influencing the outcome of the surgical operations. Moreover, even what happened with the patients was asleep in the operating room seemed to have a direct impact on the outcome of the surgery. If the case did not go smoothly, if the members of the operating team were arguing with one another, if there was any discourse, the patient would be directly or negatively infected. The harmony seemed to be key and just to be in the and just in Navajo philosophy. One tiny thing amidst could influence everything else that happened. In response to this realization, I took more time to talk about my patients to establish a bond of trust with them before surgery. I try to keep the tone within calm and serene. I worked hard not to allow adverse negative conditions to arise. I was bringing Navajo philosophies into the knowing and treating my patients was very profound privilege. I realized I was a surgeon. I had license to travel to a country no other person can visit, to the inside of a person's body and sacred and holy place. To perform surgery is to move a place where spirits are. It's the place one should not enter if they cannot enter with koso. As I modify the Western techniques with elements of Navajo culture and philosophy, I have seen the wisdoms and truth of the Navajo medicine too. I know and how Navajo patients can benefit from it. In this way, I'm pulling the strands of my life even closer together. The results have been dazzling, Hojono, and it has been beautiful. It has my own private medical experiments, although it has not been proven to be scientific method. My hope is that eventually to help design studies that demonstrate the truth of what my eyes have seen. But I believe that I've seen at first hand its effectiveness, and I continue to bring DNA ways into the OR, into the operating room. I want to teach other students of surgery these things and instill respect for their incredible honor. They do more than fix broken parts of the human body. They bear the responsibility for life itself. In our era of managed care, because of financial constraints and the technological development of better and better equipment, the medicine has drifted away from certain basic practices that improve medical outcomes. Emphasis is placed on training doctors to be efficient, cut costs, and be timely, making bedside manner an afterthought. But patients who feel taken care of and understood fare better. We doctors, like medicine men, are in the business of healing. We must not lose sight of it. My insights run counter to the Western medical practitioners, training with the pressure of an increasing overburdened healthcare system, the tightened schedules and budget cuts in the hospitals. I do not expect it will be easy for them to receive this message. Medicine is moving quite in a different direction. Although the Navajo view would mean a 180-degree shift for many doctors, but simply implementing the Navajo ways, I believe doctors can achieve better results in the practices of living between two worlds and never quite belonging to either. I have learned from both. Navajo folk tells how some of the stars were born, and I think sometimes as I navigate the thin and delicate lines, the medicine I practice and the culture of my patients. Here's the poem. As fireman was descending from the ladder from the sky, a coyote stepped up onto the blanket, and he carried. All right, the poem again. As fireman was descending the ladder from the sky, coyote stepped up to the blanket. He carried and grasped it by two corners, strung it into the air. into the air, so the stone fragments and stardust swept across the sky into a great arc which reached the horizon to horizon. This formed the Milky Way, which the Navajo called Yaxha. It is the pathway for the spirits traveling between heaven and earth. Each little star is a footprint. Navajo healers use the song to carry words of the beauty way. The songs provide a blueprint for how to live healthy, harmonious, and balanced life. I would like to create such a pathway between cultures so that people can walk across and see the wonders of the other side. The scalpel is my tool, as we are all the newer technologies of laparoscopy. But my silver bear, my Navajo beliefs and culture from the Tsushima and Ashi Dine clears clans. The Navajo heritage are what guides me. Modern physicians who have so much technology at their disposal must somehow find a way back to healing their primary tasks. We should treat our patients the same way we would treat our own relatives. We must find what has been lost as we have become unrupted with scientific advances, working with communities and creating bonds of trust and harmony. We must learn how to sing. Now we're moving on to chapter 2.